Well, the parts came in. It's time for me to start reassembly of the injector pump here. I ended up going with this Spaco or Spaco brand kit. This particular kit number is a 12459. It says it's an overall kit for all DB2 pumps. So this should be the correct one. It does look like it may be. And I think the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to attack what I think is going to be the hardest thing first, which is these umbrella seals. There's a warning I've seen on several forums where they talk about that once you remove this from the unit, that these seals will tend to swell. The old seals will tend to swell, and it makes it almost impossible to reinsert them. So they recommend, even though it's kind of a pain to do it, that you always replace these seals when you take this apart. So they're called umbrella seals because they have an umbrella or cup shape to them, and there are 3 of them. This cup is facing that way. This orange one in the middle is also facing that way, and then this one is facing out. So this one is responsible for keeping engine oil from splashing up and migrating along here and getting into the injector pump. And these 2, one right after the other, are responsible for keeping diesel fuel from getting into the crankcase. So taking them off, that's pretty easy because, well, like I said, you can cut them off if you have to. But actually, that one didn't break. I'm surprised, since that one did. So I can't believe it, but this kit only has 2 umbrella seals in it. That really steams my pumpkin. I mean, come on. This is a DB2 pump, and this kit's supposedly for all DB2s. And yeah, I double-checked. It's not in here. Hey, good news. I did find a 3rd seal. Yeah, it was laying right here on the bench. Yeah, so... Okay, so yeah, I reused one of the old seals, and I may end up regretting it, I don't know. So what I ended up doing was I reused one of the old seals, not the one that broke, and the old seal, I'm using it in the oil position, so where its job is to just keep the oil from getting in that way, because I figure that's less pressure, maybe, I don't know. At least that's why I think they put 2 seals back to back on the fuel side. So now I've got the seals installed. This kit came with this little pouch of this funky grease that I just, there we go. This little one. I don't know where I'm supposed to use this grease, so I used a film of it all over this to help aid in stretching these umbrella seals over the shaft and getting them into position. So now they're all in position. That's the good news. So now this is where things get kind of hairy. They make a special tool, a couple of special tools actually, Stanadyne does, that are designed to help install these seals. One of them is almost looks like a plastic tube, and apparently the idea is you slide the plastic tube over these seals, and it must compress them, and then I think it must be a really thin walled tube that allows you to then get this in there and then slide the tube out. And then another one is like a clamp thing. Also, so actually though, on the plastic tube one, I found on a website that was selling that part that they said on the models where the shaft has a snap ring that goes here, which mine does, because remember this inserts this way and then the snap ring goes in down there, that it's not for use on those. So apparently this isn't even supposed to be the style that can use this plastic tube thing, which is great because the stupid plastic tube thing was ridiculously expensive for a plastic tube. It was silly money. And then the other thing is almost like a clamp with a cup shape to it that allows you to squeeze this and then install it. But that's problematic too because of the fact that you've got this bearing out here before you even get to where it goes in, and there's actually a bevel in there, so that's not the problem. The tricky part's going to be getting these, which are facing, the cup's facing that way, getting these to go in. So what I'm thinking I'm going to try and do is I'm going to put some more grease on these seals. I'll lube these up a little bit. You know, the bad part is, like, if I roll one of these seals or whatever, I'm going to probably not be able to even know until, like, I go to put this together and run it, and the rolled seal tears, or who knows what's going to happen. I don't know. There's, like, no clearance here to work on this. Thinking maybe if I turn it while I gently push in, maybe it will go. I'm hoping. Ooh. I don't know. Well, hopefully that's okay. Alright, so now I'm going to reinstall this valve assembly. Actually, I already knocked it in there, but so this little valve assembly goes. It's got a little narrow part that's on one side and a hollow part on the other. The hollow part faces down. The narrow part faces up because the spring rides over that. Then the spring goes on, and then there's this little follower piece. And then oh, okay. So after I was way past this point, I realized that I had inadvertently, instead of installing this little piece with this spring, I had inadvertently installed this little deal here with this spring, which actually goes in this bottom advanced cylinder assembly. So I had to take this back part apart again. So the valve down in there is correct, but this spring is supposed to go with this doohickey. And I noticed that the kit actually came with a new one of those for some reason. So I figured since they provided it, I might as well use it. I'll scratch that. The one that's in here looks smaller in diameter. It's a different size, so yet again another problem with not ordering the precisely correct kit number. And the way that I know this is the right spring is because this spring is exactly the right diameter, so that it actually kind of locks onto this little pin here, where this one does not. I remember that being stuck on there like that. So just drop that in, drop that thing in to follow it. That probably also explains why I had such a hard time putting this Allen screw in. You think about it, I was trying to compress the spring in there with this thing in there. Yeah, that's a lot easier. Okay. I think next I'll put the weight basket assembly on, which is this right here. Now, in the kit, there is a plastic ring. Okay, if you have an assembly like this, okay, that's a one-piece assembly, then you don't need this. And the earlier design, there was almost like a phenolic ring or some kind of substance, a ring made out of material that would break down and break apart, and then the little pieces would come off and they would start to clog your different passages in the pump and cause all kinds of problems. And when you did a rebuild on those pumps and you got this kit, you could use this to replace that ring that was falling apart. But then they came out with this alternative part, which in later models I think was just standard, but then you could also, my understanding is you can buy this as a separate part to upgrade your pump. So this is the solid one-piece basket assembly. When we took this apart, I had noticed that there was a small tiny ball in there. That's not even on the parts list, so I don't know where that came from. I don't see any purpose that it could serve. So there is a little notch right here, and I know there's a notch right here where that ball was sitting, so I know that that's going to go on like that. and then that's held on by a snap ring. Next up, I'm going to reinstall these two little plungers, and just like how they were sticking before, I now want to make sure that they move really freely. So I've made sure these are really clean, and I'm going to put just a little bit of lube on there. And I can feel that I can move them back and forth freely, which is great. Now I'm going to reinstall these rollers. The rollers, they slide in like so, and then sliding in like that. I'm going to put the cam ring in position. I think I may have already mentioned that this is like one of the few parts in here that you can actually install completely backwards. And it's the kind of thing that if you don't notice it and you put it all back together, you're not going to know until you put it back on the engine and try and start it. And I think it'll actually be like 180 degrees out of time. And the reason why this cam ring's designed the way it is because on some engines, this shaft is going to be rotating counterclockwise, and on other engines it's going to be clockwise because they use the same pump on so many different applications. So there's actually a line on the ring here, shows you what direction it's meant to go in depending on which way you flip it. Okay, so on this application for my truck, the shaft, the input shaft, is going to be running counterclockwise. So if we're looking at, this is the rear of the pump where the injector lines come out of. So this is the input side of the pump as far as the shaft. Drive shaft comes in on the front here. So looking at it from this direction, we want counterclockwise rotation. So right now that's clockwise. So we're going to flip it around like this, and we're going to put it on like so. And that would be the correct orientation. I double checked this against my disassembly videos. If you take this apart and realize that you didn't notice this before you get to this point and you have no idea what to do, one of the things is that this line right here, which is the line that shows up in that little inspection window on the side, this little inspection plate, and you're looking through here, this line, you notice it's not directly through the hole. That line will always be on top. In other words, if I put it on backwards, oops, a little roller just fell out. I'll take care of that in a second. See the line on the bottom? That would be incorrect. So I want the line on the top. And I want the roller back in the unit. There we go. Okay. Next up, I'm going to replace this O-ring now, because if I slide this down onto here and then I want to put this O-ring on, I'm going to have to stretch the O-ring over the weight carrier and all of this other stuff. Guess I'll pop out the two O-rings on the back here. There's this one, which is the cone-shaped cap. Gets sealed by that. And then there's this little itty-bitty one right here. This is the hole where the screw goes through with the little retaining or locking clamp for that ring, for that cone. And they got a little O-ring there so that fuel can't migrate through the threaded hole and come out and leak here. And that one's in pretty bad shape, so definitely want to replace that. So now I should be good to go installing the head here onto this shaft. I fully expect to be putting this directly into the vehicle after completing this reassembly. So as soon as I do that, of course, diesel fuel will be going in there and doing the job that I'm doing right now. Alright, so now I'm going to install these two little retaining plates. It's a little split ring deal here that goes in underneath here like so. You want this notch to line up with that other notch like this. And that's really what keeps this from being able to fall out now. It's kind of a ingenious little design. And now I can put on the little vanes. So first pair, the little spring between them goes with notch facing up, so that the next pair with the springs between them can go with notch facing down, and they overlap like so. Now I'm going to install this ring here, which this ring actually keeps these two plates together. You want to make sure that this notch that's created by the union of the two plates here is over that hole, because later when we put this part back in, this pin is going to ride through a groove in the eccentric ring and into that hole. But first I want to get this little ring on here like so, and again I'm going to rotate this back so that that lines up like I want it to. Now I'm going to get this eccentric ring in. I don't think it matters which way this goes on, face up or face down. Alright, so it looks like that's lined up. I'm just going to check the alignment with this. Now it's interesting to me that this is clearly marked with a CC and a C for counterclockwise or clockwise. The C and the CC on this is because they use the same part for either application. The difference is this pin will probably be located in this hole for a clockwise rotation, and notice it's in the pin for counterclockwise rotation, which is what we had already talked about just a little while ago, right? So looks like we're on the right track. You may recall I did not disassemble this intentionally because of the fact that this screw right here is an adjustment. Depending on how much this screw is adjusted, it changes the tension on the spring inside here. So the only thing I did with this was make sure that the plunger moves freely. This was sticking, but I just kept squirting carb cleaner in there and cleaning it out, and it's nice and free now, so I don't think that's going to give me a problem. But again, if you can avoid taking this apart, not a bad idea to just avoid it. Alright, so next up I'm going to install this part. And now I've got to get my screen and make sure that's cleaned. Alright, the screen is just a press fit down on the end here. It's pretty much flush with the end. There is a gap here. There's actually a plastic standoff, so you don't want to force that down because you'll just end up breaking those. Alright, I'm going to now screw this cone back on, but I'm just going to lightly seat it. I'm going to see if I could find a torque spec somewhere on the line or in the manual for this cone, just to be trying to be on the safe side. These are really fine threads. Alright, so now I want to have the pump facing up so I can install the weights into the basket assembly and all that. So I'm just going to use my my 5C collet holder with a collet that will actually close on this diameter right here as a makeshift little stand. Kind of an unorthodox use for one of these stands, but I like it. It works great. Okay, so the thrust washer goes underneath this part, and this part has to go in with this side facing up, and its lower lip actually is underneath the weights. So what happens is this actually will move in and out as the weights move. So what happens is as the RPMs start to go up higher, these weights will push out, will fly outwards from centrifugal force, and that will move this forward, which will affect the throttle linkage and meter the fuel down. So that's how the governor works. So the trick is we have to get this assembly onto this assembly, and we've got to deal with this O-ring. So I'm going to lube this up really well, try and make life easier. But at the same time, we're trying to get this shaft to engage that notch. And as we had discussed before, there's a hole on one side that has to line up with this little dot on the tang so that we make sure we're not 180 degrees out of phase or out of time. And at the same time, I've got to guide this blindly down through this collar, through that thrust washer. So I'm looking down the top here and I'm making sure my thrust washer is not in the way, that it's centered. So this ought to be a trick. I've got the large hole locking for the locking bolt on the bottom facing me. So I know that's the bottom of the pump. So I'm going to put the assembly on like this. The cam ring, I've got that so that the hole with the line is on the right hand side, which is where the inspection window is. So let's see if this is going to work. Well, my camera battery died, but believe it or not, I was able to do it. It's a little tricky, but it can be done. I've actually got this in now. It's fully seated. I can see by the way the holes are lining up here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to install the large bolt on the bottom. It retains the head into the body assembly. I just want to make sure I get the right seals and whatnot. I could see that there's an O-ring on this, so we'll get that O-ring off and find one in the kit for that. So now I've put in this governor linkage and that plastic sleeve device down there that actually the weights when they move actually pushes that sleeve back and forth. You could spin that around, and I'm going by the parts diagram, but it appears like the flat spot is supposed to be facing up. And I tried, actually, when I had it the other way, I couldn't get this to go in, so I think that's correct. At least I hope it is. Alright, next up I want to reinstall my vent tube. Now I can reinstall the metering valve. Metering valve obviously is going to go down in this hole right here, but this linkage has to go on top of that pin. Just want to make sure you get a look at how that's in there. That's moving nice and freely now, no binding at all like before. Now I got to prep the throttle shaft for reinstallation by replacing these two O-rings. These kits like this, it's kind of an Easter egg hunt trying to figure out which ones go where. These are the closest thing I've got to O-rings left, the size that came off of here. This plastic bushing like washer piece right here, there's nothing in the kit like that. This is an aluminum something, but it's not even large enough to go on there. And there's some thin little plastic washers. That doesn't seem right either. So looking at what other parts are in here. That big plastic piece right there looks different. Or is it? You know what? I'm just going to reuse that because I don't seem to have anything exactly like that. That is just a spacer slash bushing. That doesn't have to do with sealing. The sealing is actually accomplished by the O-rings, which will be new, so I don't think it's going to be an issue. Hope.